Hi, I'm Kenny Anderson, Director of Multicultural Affairs for the City of Huntsville, and welcome to Impact. Each week we bring you information about informative things that are happening right here in our community, and today will be no different. A recent CNN story said that 22 veterans take their lives every day. That's about 1 every 65 minutes. I think most of us would consider that to be a serious problem, considering that when a person leaves a combat situation, you think that that was the biggest problem that they had to face. But it's the transition back into life that oftentimes becomes overwhelming for people. And I'm glad to say that there is help being manifested in our community right now. We're going to talk with a couple of individuals today that are working on the, should I say, the forefront of this challenge. Zara Renander is here with Turning Point Consultants, and she is a consultant with that organization. Welcome back to our broadcast.
Good to see you, Kenny.
It's good to see you also. And Josh Williams is a veterans consultant also. He is working with Turning Point Consultants. Welcome to the broadcast.
Pleasure to be here, Kenny.
You know, you hear a statistic like that, 22 a day, and it just arrests you. It just stops you in your tracks when you think about it. You think about the great sacrifice that veterans have made. And Josh, of course, you are a veteran of military service.
Yes, sir.
And you think about that tremendous sacrifice, and in some cases, the ultimate sacrifice that some people have paid. And then to come home and then face insurmountable obstacles that don't allow for the transition back into life, it's got to be devastating. Talk a little bit about that challenge, and then talk a little bit about how Turning Point is working the lives of veterans today.
Yes, it's actually so big a challenge, I think, Kenny, that some of us actually don't even want to think about it. We hope the VA is taking care of it, someone else is taking care of it, but along with those suicides, there's the unseen victim, and that is the family, who must suffer usually in silence, and their heartbreak, their lives are shattered as much as the one who has killed themselves. Yeah. And so our concern at Turning Point is to walk alongside those who are suffering. We work with, we're committed to leadership development and to helping people make life transitions. And in this case, it would be from warrior to noble warrior. How do you move, which you said, the most difficult transition, to come from a combat zone and now adopt civilian life? And how do you do that, move from warrior to noble warrior, to be leader in your community? Because these men and women have many, many skills, but they sometimes have to be reimagined. And we do work with still serving veterans in Huntsville who do heroic work in helping people find employment and get themselves back. But Josh, you, having been 2 tours of duty in Iraq, probably have a lot more to say about this than I do.
Well, I'm sure he would. And Josh, I'll jump in and say that, you know, those of us who've never served, like myself, I have great respect for people who have served. My dad served in the military. I have relatives who served in the military who were in combat. And, you know, we cannot even imagine the experiences that people have had. And of course, there's a whole range of experiences as well. Right. Just because you're sent to a place doesn't mean you're actually in the mix, but there are a lot of people that are. We can't even begin to imagine what that's like. And so not only do people come back with the physical trauma of having been in a very difficult situation, but it's the emotional and mental types of challenges that often accompany the person when they come back home. From your perspective as a veteran, talk a little bit about some of those dynamics and some of the challenges that our military men and women face when they return home.
Absolutely, Kenny. It's something that's been brought to our attention really in the forefront recently, but this is something that's existed since war has been wrought between 2 cultures or civilizations, going all the way back to Alexander the Great and the Greek army. You can look at the Civil War, and it was just called by a different name, soldier's heart, and different shell shock. And in here now we call it quote unquote PTSD. And honestly, it's a way for us as a community to label something that almost can't be labeled, because we need our labels, and I speak to that as part of that community as well. I think the most difficult journey I've ever had is in rejoining this community from being a soldier. I enlisted in 2006 after graduating college. My path led me as an enlisted man in the infantry because of different reasons, but it was really, looking on it hindsight, it was my own journey, my own initiation into manhood. But what came with that was something that I don't think I could have ever imagined. And again, I can only speak to my story, but what I've seen with work with Turning Point and being so gracious enough to be able to work with them and do what we do with veterans in the community, that the story is very similar. I returned home, a product of Monte Sano Mountain. I grew up in Huntsville. This is my home. It'll always be my home. And I was afraid to tell people that I was a soldier. I was a successful student from Huntsville High School. I was a degree in physics from Stanford University. And I didn't know how to rectify the experiences I had and the wounds that I carried that were unseen with what the community and my family saw me as. And so I hid it and I compartmentalized it. This is something that you can't really put into words, and it manifests in different symptoms. Mine were, I had a very difficult time transitioning, but in itself, finding Turning Point and the work we do with Honor Walk specifically allowed me to see myself in that light with the community. An example would be I felt this toxicity, and we recognize it as a soul wound, to borrow the words from author Ed Tick, is a soul wound that is received because you go into the military with these ideals and morals of, quite simply put, maybe bringing freedom to a place that doesn't have freedom. It's much more complex than that, but let's start there. And when you go there, the most difficult thing that I've had to ever do in my life is recognize that when I kicked in that door in Baghdad looking for the bad guy, in my understanding of good and bad at that time, I realized that in the eyes of that mother and that small child, what I saw in that reflection was the exact bad guy that I was looking for. So coming face to face with the perpetrator within ourselves and the inability to rectify that with who you want to be. But what we found is this is not just a journey of veterans or that we're dealing with right now, but it's a journey that's been understood through the ages as the hero's journey, when Zara talks about from warrior to noble warrior. And it's something that's been undertaken by many heroes and heroines from the beginning of civilization. What I thought was my inability to ever rejoin the community. I was afraid to even touch people, physically touch people, for fear that the toxicity that I carried would infect them, and I would then have to bring them face to face with the things that I saw. And the ability to integrate. And I think that's where the key is here, is the ability to integrate life experiences. Not the ones, so much the ones that we could say and hang up on our mantle as achievements of good or honorable, or the medals that we wear on our chest, but also integrating the experiences that allow us to see the full spectrum of the human condition. And I don't think in our current society, anyone can touch that like veterans. And with that full spectrum experience, they bring back to the community a concept of leadership and knowledge, true knowledge, that if empowered by that community, will allow them to not only integrate that within the community, but be able to lead that community beyond to a place where maybe, just maybe, we don't have to send our young men and women across the seas to fight in a desert.
Zara, let me ask you this question, and in light of Josh's very compelling testimony and personal reflections, which I certainly appreciate. One must have to, as a consultant, and Josh, I'm sure you're faced with this challenge also, one must find himself with the challenge of maintaining a fairly high level of optimism in the midst of so much despair, misdirection, feelings of hopelessness, etc. And I wonder, from your perspective as the consultant, how do you stay on the rails? How do you stay on the track and keep your focus emotionally in terms of working with these very emotional issues?
Well, that's a difficult question, but I am committed to being willing to walk with people, not to fix them. That's their story. But I think I am willing to be a companion on the way. And Turning Point goes to churches, to community organizations who want to have relationship with our returning vets and have training for them. Because I think that, well, thank you for your service just doesn't cut it, actually. I mean, yeah, but it doesn't deal with what's going on inside. And I think the people in our churches, in our faith communities, would like to help, but I think they don't know how. And I think we are perhaps too scared to get too close to such suffering. And so I think it helps to have some structure about how do you get into relationship? And I think, there's two sides to this. When I was a young woman, first came to the United States, it was 1964. The Vietnam War was in full throttle. My friends' boyfriends were all going to Vietnam, and they came back changed, and they couldn't speak about what had happened. And I've thought about this for a very long time, Kenny. I've thought about how do we bridge the gap? How do we say, we'll walk with you? That's actually a very simple relational thing, but it requires trust. Veterans, on their part of the thing, have to trust that the civilians will honor their experience, will not shame them, will be open and loving and compassionate towards experience that we have not had the misfortune ever to experience, but has been done in our name.
We've got just a couple of minutes left in the broadcast. It's amazing that we've just kind of blown through this time. I'd love to have another conversation with you all, actually, because the information that I think you're sharing is so valuable and so very important. Maybe we can do that. Can you guys hang around for another conversation?
Sure, absolutely.
We can hang around.
Yeah, let's hang around for another conversation, because I really, Josh mentioned Honor Walk, and I do want to talk about Honor Walk. I think it's significant. I think that the work that's being done through Turning Point is significant, and I think that it's important that people know, as always, that they don't have to suffer in silence, that there is help out there, and that you both made wonderful points on both sides. And Zara, you started out especially by saying that the family unit needs to be focused on as well in terms of this context. At least it needs to be an inclusive conversation, and we don't often do that. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that as well. But tell people how they can get information about Turning Point Consultants.
I think the best way is our website, turningpointconsultants.com. And there's a tab there to contact us, and I think that's probably the best way if anyone would like to contact us. We'd be very happy to respond.
All right. Zara Renander, she is a consultant with Turning Point Consultants, as is Josh Williams. Thank you both for being here. We're going to do another show with you guys to talk a little more about this very important information.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Kenny.
All right. We thank you for being a part of our broadcast today, and we hope that you join us for our next edition of the broadcast Impact. We also invite you to like our Facebook page at Impact with Kenny Anderson, and you can follow along with photos and other video from these shows, as well as past shows that you may not have had a chance to see. And we also ask that you share this information with a friend, because we know that most times it can be either informative, transformational, or even life-saving. For Impact, I'm Kenny Anderson. We'll see you again soon.